Just the second part.
Max, roll over.
All right, I'm going to see if I can fight with this. Can y'all hear me in the back if I don't use this? I consider myself a very loud person, but I did recently have surgery on my throat, so it did kind of quiet me down, which my wife is very thankful for. For those of y'all who haven't met me, this thing's supposed to move. Oh, there you go. All right, my name is Brandon Rogers. I moved here to Woodbridge in 2012, March of 2012. And we moved here from Texas, and I think that I speak pretty quickly for a Southern guy, so don't worry about getting too far behind. I started in this church. My wife and I team taught a marriage enrichment course or marriage study on Wednesday nights for like 3 years. We took a break this last semester because we had some other things going on. And but we're looking to get back to that in the fall. Very excited about it. My wife was actually asking me the other day what we were going to teach. I was very happy to hear that. I've been married to my lovely wife. You'll tell her I said that. For 17 years. It'll be 18 years this July, and I'm very blessed to have her. We have 2 kids at home, an 11-year-old daughter named Lily and an 8-year-old son named Nolan. And we have another son that's 24, and he's in the Air Force. We adopted him at 15, and that we could talk about that for an hour. But this is my life verse. This is my theme verse. This is something I think that says a lot about me. It's something I wanted to share. It's Philippians 1:9-11. It's very rarely that I turn to the Bible and in my quiet time that I don't think about this verse, and it's been my favorite verse for a long time. Years ago, 20 years ago, I was teaching an 8th grade youth Bible study, and this was just in the week, and ever since then, this is what brought the Lord's Word alive to me, and I always like to share it. And in this version, it says your love will keep on growing and growing, but in the version that I memorized, it says your love will abound more and more. When I first met my wife, we were very young. I was 17, she was 15. We were high school sweethearts in Texas, and it was love at first sight for me. And I don't know how rare that is, but it was definitely rare for me because it's the only time it ever happened. And so literally, I'm in my friend's car, and he's driving this girl to somebody's house, and she's picking up a CD or whatever. And young boys, that's what we used to listen to music before iTunes. And she went up to the door, and this girl walked out, and I told my friend, I said, I'm gonna marry that girl. And I was 17 years old, and I was stupid, as we all were, and he believed me, he laughed at me. He laughed at me right there, but I was serious. And then I met her, and I really liked her. I liked her more than I ever liked anyone in my life. But I don't know, now that I look back on it after all these years, was it love, right? Because that didn't hold that strong when she wasn't making me happy in the moment. And I had to learn a lot, right? Because I wasn't like Forrest Gump. I didn't automatically know what love was. And I had to learn it. And God revealed that to me through His Word and how to really love her. And that's what pointed me back to this verse, because Paul was praying for the congregation of Philippi. And he was praying for their relationships here, I think. And that they would learn, they would gain knowledge, and they would gain discernment. And the weird thing here that's contradictory to the world is out of this comes an increase in your love, not an increase in your intelligence, right? Not an increase in your respect by the community, not an increase in all those things. It's going to increase your love. I often translate this verse as, because you learned these things, your love grew. You made good choices. Those good choices produced great things as you lived your life for Christ and gave God all the credit. And so we'll begin this, since we all had kind of breakfast and we're all about to pass out, and kind of stand up, everybody. And what you're going to do is, if you're single, you're going to go ahead and sit back down. Thank you for standing up. And then when you hear your last anniversary, you're going to sit down. So the number of your last anniversary. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, no newlyweds. 5, 10. All right, you guys have been married for a long time. 15. There's a lot of marriage in here. 20. I'd be sitting down now. 25. 30. Oh, God bless you guys. You should be up here. 35. 40. 45. 46. 47. 48. 49.
We give up.
72. Wait, where are we at though, really? 50?
60.
60. All right. Fred, if I pass out, you come up. So it's got to go on.
It won't be 60 until December.
All right, well, amen. I'm working towards that. All right, I got a lot to learn from this guy. We're going to have coffee.
I think it's going to work out.
All right. So like any good Baptist, I prepared for this, and I had some radiation treatments, and I spent a lot of time alone, and so it was a good time for me to prepare for this. So I went back over all these several lessons that my wife and I had poured through with our people here, and I read Lonnie Berger's lessons on marriage. And I'm just concentrating on the marriage. And so I made a huge list, because there's a ton of information, because we did like 5 different lessons. And I made a list, and like any good Baptist, I picked the top 3, because you got to do 3. That's how it works, right? And I'm sure Brother Ray will be proud. I've got 3. And then I replaced one because we had the young men here. And Tim's going to cover that later on. So my top 3, and wrote down to challenge my style of leadership. I found early on I was leading the wrong way, and even now I have tons of room for improvement, so I want to constantly challenge that. The other one is to recognize and to accept my wife and appreciate her. This not just for who she is at her best moments, and not only for her best qualities, right? And then the next thing is to recognize that my wife is not the enemy, and this is really profound for me. I totally had it wrong. And you guys in the military can maybe relate to this. How do you fight a war effectively if you have incorrectly identified your enemy, the battlefield, and the instrument of war, right? So we'll jump into this. So challenging my leadership, the first thing you got to ask yourself, that I ask myself, is where did I get my style of leadership? Where did I learn it? I mean, most likely we get it from our fathers, our grandfathers. My dad, I come from a long line of divorce. I'll say my dad was married 5 different women, had 5 different men from 5 different women, four marriages and 4 divorces before he was 30. So I didn't get a really good example from there, and it was something I wanted to change in my life. And my mom was married 3 times and divorced 3 times. So I saw a lot of divorce, and I really think if you added up the years of my marriage and then compiled all theirs, we're getting really close to kind of getting past that. And then I made some mistakes. You know, when I became a manager at work, I was like, oh, I'm learning all these management techniques. I'll take those home. That was not a good idea. And so I made a lot of mistakes, guys. So, but I learned from them. So, and in the beginning, I thought, well, maybe it's to teach my wife. When I first got married, this is really what I thought. This is really that I was going to teach her how to make me happy. That was kind of my style of leadership. This 50 years laughs at me. Right? He was there. Right? Sure is. So that was my idea, but I was going to teach her how to fold the towels the way I liked it, right? And this was going to avoid conflict. No. But it led to the wrong types of leadership, and controlling, harshness. It was very self-centered. It was oftentimes critical, and it definitely didn't lead to her wanting to make me happy. And then this video kind of illustrates, this next video illustrates another thing that I had wrong from the beginning that I think some of y'all can relate to.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
You do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
Thanks. Thank you. Ow!
Come on, if you would just...
Don't.
Alright, so I think we've all been there, right? But I wanted to fix everything. And I'll tell you one thing that I learned in one of these marriage studies, it was so practical and like slaps you in the face, it was so simple, is to ask. Right? Say, honey, do you need a listening ear or do you need a solution? And most of the time it's a listening ear, but sometimes it's a solution. But in the beginning I thought, well, I'm going to fix all our problems, and that's how I'm going to lead. That's how I'm going to be an effective leader. And it was wrong. And so the next thing is, what's Christ's example of leadership? In Ephesians 5:25, which is one of the verses that Lonnie Berger pointed out to, it says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave up himself for her." The first time I had ever heard of a reference to this verse was very on in my youth. Was in my youth, and I had decided, my wife and I were young, and we had dated for a while, and my in-laws had told us that we were not to get married until she graduated from college. And we kind of decided we didn't want to wait that long, and so I went and got a ring, and I was going to go ask for her hand in marriage. And you had to understand, my father-in-law was the scariest person on the face of the earth at this time. I'd been around their house for like 4 or 5 years at the time. I'd been around him a lot. He had maybe said like 3 words to me, and he stared at me constantly. He was going to stab me. I mean, he had me intimidated, like so crazy. And he had gone to great lengths for this too. Like one time I had a clutch go out on a 4-wheel drive truck I had, and my wife had talked him into helping me fix it because I couldn't afford to do it at the time. And we spent the better part of 3 whole days in his garage fixing this truck. And he said nothing more to me than get the wrench or get out of my way. And so I went to him to have lunch and had taken this ring, and I'm sitting across the table room. I'm scared to death, so I just get out the ring and I sit it on the table and I tell him, I want to marry your daughter. And he says, do you love her like Christ loved the church? And I'll tell you honestly, I looked at him with a blank stare. Blank. I didn't know what he was talking about. It took me a long time to figure that out. But I knew one thing. I needed to say yes. And so I did. And then later on, I figured out how much this meant about service and sacrifice and how it's brought me back to the gospel. And you can ask yourself one practical question. How are you giving up your life for your wife? And many of us as men, we naturally think of this in a protection mode. If somebody broke in my house in the middle of the night, would I jump in front of a bullet for my wife? And every single one of them would say, yeah, that's me, that's me. Right? But when you think of it as a pride aspect, would you put your pride on the altar for her? It's a whole lot harder to raise your hand and say, yeah, that's me. It was definitely much harder for me. And Lonnie Berger points out in A Godly Husband that it begins with death to self, that this is the first step to becoming a godly husband. And Christ said in Mark that it's the first step in following him. He says, if anyone wants to be my follower, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me and the gospel will save us. And isn't it true that selfishness is the root of most conflict in marriage? We know that most marriages end because of money, domestic responsibilities, sex, power, a lot of different things. And it's all about what's fair. Anybody that's been married for long enough to know that there is no fair in marriage, right? So I have to constantly remind myself and ask myself this, very simply, is this about my pleasure, my self-fulfillment, or is it for God's pleasure? Because that's what our marriage is truly for. And then lastly on this is, what example do you want to give your children? Because what are we doing now? Right now, every day we're in front of our boys, we're teaching them how to treat their wife. Every time we're in front of our daughters, we're most likely teaching them how men are selfish and how they can't trust their husbands. Now, there's a flip side of this. You don't want to make your marriage an idol. And lots of people do this. Lots of people do this at church. They do this in their own homes. Oh, we have the perfect marriage. We never fight. And lots of people will take this to great lengths with their kids. They would say, we're going to make a rule. We're never going to fight in front of our kids. And I've even talked to couples before that said, we're never going to fight in front of our kids. And we're on our way home from church one day, and we're trying to figure out where we're going to go eat. And she said 2 places, and I said 2 places. And we knew it was going to get into an argument, so we just went home and ate. Well, what are we teaching our kids? Right? Are we teaching them how to resolve conflict? Because that's where they're going to learn it. They're going to learn how to resolve conflict on a healthy basis from us. They're going to learn how to resolve conflict in their marriage. Now, don't go crazy. I mean, keep it to a minimum. You don't want to frighten them. But this goes back. There's some research that a guy by John Gottman did. They call this guy the Einstein of love. And basically, he did a lot of research on marital stability. He'd bring in couples, he'd ask them a bunch of questions, and he could tell you within 3 years, 5 years, at like a 95% accuracy rate, whether these people would be together or whether they'd be divorced. And what he broke it down to, if you can break it down to one sentence, was it wasn't how you fought, it was how you make up, right? It wasn't the people that fought every day versus the people that fought once a month or every 6 months or once a year. It was if you fought every day, and you could resolve that conflict quickly and in a healthy way, those were the people that stayed married forever. Those were the people that made it 50, 60 years. And isn't it true? Marriage becomes more stable over time when you learn how to reconcile. And it's nice to see that reconciliation is at the root of what keeps a marriage together. Because if that's not the gospel, I don't know what is. Now, next, I needed to learn to accept and appreciate my wife, and as a gift from God. Lion Berger pulls out this verse in his studies, Genesis 2:18. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper for his complement." Now, he also says in there that they fill in the gap of your personality, and this is kind of a tough concept for us to get. But it's easy if you just ask yourself, what would my life be without my wife and kids? And I would easily say that I would be a different man. Because marriage confronts my selfishness. My family confronts my selfishness. They say that it's the sandpaper God uses to polish our character. And it's hard to look at your marriage. You go to your wife on Valentine's Day tomorrow, and everybody say, "You're my sandpaper, honey." Sandpaper. Right?
60?
It's just as slow. Don't do that.
That's rough.
But in Proverbs 14:4, it says, "Where there are no oxen, the feeding trough is empty." Right. So there's if you don't have an ox, there's no poop to clean up in the trough. Right. There's nobody to feed. There's nothing to do there. It's easy. But then it goes on. It says, "But abundant harvest comes through the strength of an ox." But it's that ox that gives you the abundant harvest, right? This is the way life works, men. And this is the way our marriage works. This is the way everything works. And don't go home and call your wife, "Hey, honey, you're my ox." That's not going to work either.
Is she the trough or the ox?
So another thing that from Love and Respect, this thing that we did, he said this a lot. He said, "Not wrong, just different." And he would go on. He had this metaphor with these pink sunglasses. And who's read this book? Anybody? It's a good book. And it had the blue megaphone and the pink megaphone, and he would say, not wrong, not different. But I like the way that Mark Grunger describes it in his series, Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. And he talks about the difference between a man and woman's brain.
We're going to start discussing men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right? Now, men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is, the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box. All right?
Amen.
All right. And then he goes on to discuss the woman's brain.
Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car, and the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. It's like... It's like the internet superhighway. Okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. It's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care.
As much about everything, but not wrong, just different, right? And can I get an amen, right? Women are different. That's one of the things that I love about my wife, and it's something that we need to appreciate. And it's not just something that we need to appreciate; it's something that we need to honor, right? We're not just asked to accept their differences, we're asked to honor them. In 1 Peter 3:7, it says, husbands in the same way live with your wives with an understanding of their weaker nature, yet showing them honor as co-heirs of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. Right? And so they're obviously different. They're a weaker nature. They have a different nature than we do, and thank God for that. But don't get stuck on that weaker, because she's your co-heir. She's your equal for the grace of life. And that you're to honor her. Honor means to hold something in high esteem, in fame, and in glory. This is the top end of appreciation. This is up here. And all of us married men hopefully told them that when we married them, and we said that we would cherish them. And that was a promise we made them. Okay. And then lastly, and this is in the last studies we did, this was really, really something that I mean, just opened up something for me, and it's changed the way that I look at a lot of my interaction with my wife. Is that my wife is not the enemy. That you have a real enemy. I have a real enemy. All right? And this goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. What was under attack there? It was the relation. Hey, go ahead, Connor. It was the first husband and wife. And where did the enemy find the opportunity? When they were separated. And he played them on each other. Right? And so when you're at odds with your wife, who are you really at odds with? Man, don't be naive. Lonnie Berger says every man's a warrior. And what you're fighting, you need to pay attention to. You need to recognize the spiritual attacks that occur in your marriage, and you need to learn how to shut them down. It says in 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9, be serious, be alert. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around you like a roaring lion, looking for anyone he can devour. Resist him and be firm in faith, knowing that the same sufferings are being experienced by your fellow believers throughout the world. Also says in John 10:10, a thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And he's looking to destroy your marriage. It's a very real enemy. In Peter, it talks about a ravenous lion. How does a lion attack its prey? It's always out there stalking. It's always lurking. The devil is always there. It's looking. A lion's looking for a weak prey in the herd. He's always there looking for you at a weak moment, trying to find you at a weak moment. And then they go in for the kill. They seek to destroy. They're not going to play with the antelope. They're going to kill it. Now, and it also said, fellow believers, this is important. This is important for all of us. Is that you're not alone. It's not just you. It's not just your marriage that has problems. And if you have serious problems, you need to reach out to the other men in this room. You need to find an accountability partner. You need to go to the pastors of this church. There are people here to help you. And don't suffer alone. Now, this next thing is the agreements we make. And this was tough for me to sit, and this might take time for y'all to develop too. But in John 8:44, it says, because he is a liar, it's talking about the devil, and he is the father of lies. This was a concept that was introduced to us, and it pretty much boils down to Satan is infiltrating your thoughts with lies, okay, on a constant basis, especially if you don't protect yourself. And there's usually a little truth in the lie, right? Going back to the beginning. This is how to win two truths in one lie. Who's ever played that game, right? You pick, even your lie, you pick a little truth in it, and everybody's like, oh, I know he used to do that, and they pick that as the truth, right? And this is how Satan gets you. And it usually involves an absolute, right? And this is an easy way to recognize these when they come to you. Is that she's always nagging me. It's always been like this. She never takes care of things. It's never going to get any better. I'm never going to let anybody hurt me again. Anybody fall into those ever before? Right? All of us. Every single one of them. And even just recognizing these and fighting them as they come, once you know this, is great, but you might need to go back and break some agreements that you might already made. You need to sit down, you need to pray, and you say, Lord, what agreements have I made? And how have these agreements affected my marriage? And then you need to call on God's power to get those out of your life and to break those off of your heart. Now, lastly, in this, I said fight for each other. If you're walking down the street and a man walks up, grabs your wife by the arm and starts dragging her off, are you going to say, oh, see you later, dear? You know? No, you're going to throw down. Right? I'm going to throw down. And we don't see this when we're dealing with spiritual warfare. We will let our wife get drug off. And we won't fight for her. You got to understand you're at war, and you got to recognize who your closest ally is. And your wife is your closest ally. And what do you do with your allies? You convene with them, right? God and your wife is your ally. You convene with them. You pray for her and you pray with her. And I'll tell you, this is not automatic. And you shouldn't think that it is. If you don't pray with your wife or you don't pray for your wife now, it's not automatic. And if it's not easy to start with, it's not. Because early on, I would pray and say, God, please help me to harbor this bitterness so that I can win this argument, and overrun this stuff. And so it took me a while to figure out how to pray for my wife. And even praying with her was harder because I would get these attacks and I would think, oh man, that sounds stupid, or she thinks I'm stupid, or is that genuine? And I would really just question myself all the time. And so it took a lot of time to get this going. But it's become one of the most important things that my wife and I do together as a team to fight spiritual warfare together. All right, anybody here from Texas? All right, Texas. All right, you guys will get this. So Texas, this video is kind of motivating, kind of close with, and everything for me as far as motivating kind of goes back to my high school Texas football days, because that's all they care about. You can get out of school, you don't have to read, just as long as you can carry a football. Just.
All right, men. They're coming to get us in just a few minutes. Are you men ready?
Yes, sir.
Are you men ready? Yes, sir. Right. I know some of you are wondering why we run over these plays over and over and over again. You've been thinking, we've got it, coach. But we're about to find out exactly what you've got. Those people out there, they think you're just grooms. That's it. Just grooms. What are you? Nonsense. What are you? Nonsense. Yeah. The only question is, what kind of husbands are you? You're about to find that out. Wilson!
Yes, coach.
It's 6:30. Your wife is coming home from work. She's tired. You're tired. She's grumpy, and there's no food in the refrigerator. What do you do?
Live with understanding, sir.
Right. Reynolds! Your wife, she's worn out, and she's discouraged. She's lacking confidence. What do you do?
I love her, coach. I cherish.
Yes, and
I nourish.
you bet you do. Keith!
Yes, coach.
Settle down now, Keith. It's the middle of the night, and you hear a noise.
I protect her, coach.
Okay, Keith. But what if your mother pulls you aside and she makes some suggestions on things that your wife could be doing better? What about that, Keith? Jefferson.
You gotta protect your wife, coach. Even if it's from your sharp-tongued mother. You got it, coach. I protect her.
You bet you do. Men, listen up. When you're out there, you're not going to have time to think. You need to know what to do and to get it done.
But, Coach, sometimes I get confused.
Dolly? Are you whining?
Not really. It's just
Dolly, this is marriage. There is no whining in marriage. Is there whining in marriage?
No, sir.
Is there whining in marriage?
No, sir.
What do we do?
Love and lead.
What do we do?
Love and lead.
It's time, Coach. Okay, man. What's the game plan?
Love and lead.
Again.
Love and lead.
Again.
Love and lead.
Again.
Love and lead.
Again.
All right, man. What's the game plan?
Love and lead.
Again?
Love and lead.
All right. Hey, you want to go ahead and close in prayer?
Well, I was going to ask you to do that. I'm going to make an announcement first. Hey, when we get up, Brandon's going to close us in prayer. When we get up, if you can fold your chair up and put it on the side here and help with the tables. Right?
Tables go on the rack over there.
Tables go on the rack.
And so, if anybody wants to know where I stole most of this material, and I want to talk about it afterwards, this is it, and y'all can come and talk to me about that. We'll go ahead and pray. Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this place. Thank you so much for this church. Thank you for the men that came early to prepare for this thing, to pray over this event, Lord, that are doing all the work. Lord, we just thank you so much for those workers. Thank you for the givers that provide for this building, for the food. We thank you for everybody who donated to the Hilda Barge this morning, Lord. We thank you. It's such a joy, it's such a blessing to hear all these men lift their voices to God, hear them sing. And Lord, thank you for this morning and energizing me for this talk, Lord, and speaking through me. Lord, thank you. And bless us as we all go out throughout our day. And may we take that hope that you give us into our daily lives and our work environments, and we show that to someone who needs it. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.